what we're trying to do, and what you all have the chance to do ahead of time, rather than what we've been doing to reopen the consent decree, which is modify it and to integrate green infrastructure principles as part of the whole program. My own humble view is that all green or all gray are neither going to be typically the right outcome. It's going to be a combination of both. They have different attributes. They have different strengths. And in my view, a combination of the two plays off both and gives you a better remedy than either one by themselves, unless there's circumstances that are very particular in a given place. It may be that there's some areas that there's so much opportunity for green infrastructure that does work as a 100% remedy. Other places there's just not enough space for green infrastructure or something similar, so that a tunnel makes sense. We're green, gray, and the hybrid is what we're looking at. And what you're seeing on the map is we're not going to modify the Anacostia River tunnel system. The quantities are so great and we're so far into it, and that's the part that everyone is most concerned about, that we're just going to complete that as designed. So the Anacostia tunnel system will be completed as gray. Green is what we're going to seek to modify on the Potomac Tunnel and the Rock Creek Tunnel. And these are the parts of the sewer sheds that we have the chance to implement green infrastructure to achieve the same goal as the tunnel, as you've heard today, capturing and holding stormwater on the surface where it can be a benefit and an asset rather than draining it down into concrete tunnels. These are the two tunnels I've already mentioned that we're trying to modify. Our modified proposal would eliminate completely the tunnel on the Rock Creek and would shrink the tunnel along Potomac in half. This is the one, by the way, that is most problematic to build. For those of you who know Washington, there's a brand new park along this stretch of Georgetown that's gorgeous. And in order to do a construction project this size, we will have to tear up the entire waterfront. And nobody wants to do that, least of all us. We don't want to piss everybody off to no end. But if that's what the court orders us to do, we will have no choice. This project will allow us to not do half of the tunnel. And it actually makes sense because we have a much smaller area in order to do enough green infrastructure to capture enough stormwater to get a similar performance goal. It's the challenge that we have is, can we hit a comparable performance with green infrastructure and gray that we would have with only gray? That's tough. And since we have an existing consent decree, we have done very, very detailed and extensive modeling to demonstrate that case. These are the numbers real quickly, and this is actually what we're really pleased about. This is what we had ahead of time, the long-term control plan, and then our hybrid plan. We believe the hybrid plan is going to be as good or better in each case for overflow volume at its completion than only gray. That took a tremendous amount of effort, years of modeling, analysis in the field, lot-by-lot review of where we would do the work. It was also necessary because I don't think many of the environmental advocates in Washington, D.C., and we have them all, would have allowed us to, once we have the consent decree with a number, it's hard to ever back away. And maybe that's the right outcome. That's a different argument. But once you have that number, we worked very hard to come up with a performance number that was as good or better than what the gray only. One of the elements that we do get with the hybrid green infrastructure plan, because we don't think in our case it's going to save us much in total cost. Other cities have seen that it saves money. In our case, it's probably going to be about the same cost, but we're asking for 5 additional years to do the project. And in cash flow basis, 5 additional years makes a big difference. Our ratepayers I've doubled rates at DC Water in the 5 years I've been there, and they're slated to double again. And that's not, it's the proposal I made this morning is for a overall residential rate increase of 12.1%, and that is after a rate increase last year of 11%. My first year was 18%. You can imagine all the public meetings myself, we do dozens of them, and they're brutal. So what is hard to describe until you're in front of those crowds is what this takes to present to a public who is not used to these kinds of costs that you're trying to serve. So an additional 5 years lets us spread out these costs, and green infrastructure does, as a practical matter, take longer to build. This is something we've learned the hard way. When you are doing green infrastructure in Georgetown, which is already incredibly crowded, for any of you who have ever been there, if you've ever had to drive in it, In order to put green infrastructure along the edges of the street, which is where you usually do it, you've got to cut off parking. You've got to cut off right-of-ways for the period when you're doing the work, and that part of the town can only take so much construction at any given moment before you can't get around anymore, which is a consideration we didn't originally think about. And you only learn as you get into it, which is you can only do a certain amount of road work at any one time in any one area before it can't function anymore for the road part of the work rather than the green part of the work. So we do need extra years to do enough green infrastructure to attain our goals. You don't have to see this. You all know about the benefits. Here's one of the most interesting slides. With a tunnel, we don't have any benefits until the very end of when it goes into place. And the Potomac and the Rock Creek tunnels, which if we do not get the modification, we will build, and we will build them on time. So we've always said that if we don't get the modification, we will do what we've been ordered by the court. But there are no benefits at all until the tunnel is finished. And those tunnels won't be finished till 2025. Green infrastructure, you start seeing benefits as soon as you start building it. We have this being built in phases. We build a set, make sure we monitor and control and learn anything from it, then we build another set. So we do it in phases, as you sort of see that's going in steps. But you get a tremendous amount of upfront benefit that you get none of here. Since we've asked for 5 additional years, there is a point where the tunnel would have done better in a period of time than our solution, because we'll be a little bit behind when the tunnel comes in place, and then we catch up over the 5 years that is to come. In total, the total benefits are more than the delay causes in what we don't achieve. And the ultimate ending point is the same. So the comparable benefit at the end is the same, and the total benefit that you get under the curve is better on this side than it is with gray, which is why we proposed it. And gaining 5 years to help with cash flow with our ratepayers is very valuable. You've probably seen this. There's a lot of information about other cities in here. We think DC Water should have been in more of these, Carter, as good models. But there are great models that are in here. And these are some of the other jurisdictions. Just like you're looking, the great advantage is you can look at others and see what's been done and learn from it. Kansas City, Cleveland, New York, Philadelphia, we have thoroughly investigated all of what's been done. New York is one of the best. Philadelphia has almost a full green solution. The challenge that we have is none of them are hitting performance numbers that we're hitting at DC. That's what we've had, is a 96% overall, 98% on the Anacostia performance numbers. Those are rough. And these are others, and then there's a lot more that are listed in this very good paper. So progress to date. This is not for the faint of heart. We've invested a lot of money to go in this direction. We actually have been using green infrastructure in part to learn a lot about it, so that by the time it's a remedy, I've told our engineers, treat it just the way you would a tunnel. This is something we have to design, structure, plan for, maintain, know the performance of, be able to report it to anybody who asks, and even if they don't, we'll still report it. So we wanted to get a tremendous amount of working knowledge of how it works in DC, not just as a hydrologic matter, but what are the agencies involved? Who are the players involved? What are the permitting issues that are necessary? And they're fascinating and tough, and again, often unthought of at first. What was the agency that has some of the biggest problems with green infrastructure? Us. It was us. Because when you put in green infrastructure, if it's anywhere near a water pipe, guess where roots go? To the water. And we often have backed up water pipes or sewer mains because of root intrusion. A lot of our water mains are very close to the curb. Even some of them are under the sidewalks. You put in green infrastructure, it's putting in systems that go in. That's where the water is going to be captured. That puts new weight on these old, the median age of a water main in Washington, D.C. is 79 years. Median. So half of them are older than that. And you put more weight on water mains and they can break. Nobody wants that. So the challenge of building all this great green infrastructure on the surface compared to all the other stuff that's already down there, including our own, is much greater than we expected. So we wanted to learn. Expected may be the wrong word. We just hadn't done it before. So we didn't know what to expect, and it's been a lot. And it's been a lot with our own stuff. But we have been doing it at some significant level. We've been funding the city's environmental agency to do a River Smart. It's called River Smart Washington. That's a demonstration program that's going in the city at schools. We actually had the flooding problems I mentioned. We used green infrastructure for a quick solution because we are building that tunnel with the drill machine from Qatar. But even though we have that on an accelerated design build schedule, it won't be finished until next year. And we needed something sooner than that. So we did several $1 million of green infrastructure within 6 months, and it works. It's amazing how much stormwater we've been able to capture, and flooding has decreased as a result. We also had a great green infrastructure challenge. Other cities have done that. We found it fantastic. We had a lot of great companies come forward, and we're funding the best of them. We had a competitive challenge to best 3 or 4 because we wanted them to not just show us what has already been done, but what do you think is cutting edge that we might be able to do in DC? Because as long as we're going to spend all this money, we want to make sure we're doing the latest and greatest for what can work in our city. So the progress to date is the scope of what we've done here. It's in total cost. You can see the numbers. What is that? About 14 million, 10 to 15 million dollars. That's not small money to any jurisdiction, but it's not a lot of money compared to the hundreds of millions of dollars we're investing on gray. So in our judgment, this was a very good upfront investment because we've got to be able to prove to people that green infrastructure will work and what benefit it derives to them. This is one of the aspects, and it's referenced in here, but I don't think it gets enough play in much of the materials, including ours, until we really realized it, which is the advantage green infrastructure has to the community and on job creation. We opened a public comment period on our proposal to do green infrastructure for 90 days. The largest portion of public comments came in positive for the modification into green infrastructure. And by far the most of them came from job organizations, community organizations, because of their interest. When you do tunnels, those are the sand hogs, they're great, but they're specialists, and they go from tunnel job to tunnel job. You don't get as many jobs of that for someone who needs a job in your town, where that money, yes, it's coming from your ratepayers, but it's going back to someone who lives in your town, who pays taxes, who starts spending money in stores and all the rest. This kind of work is absolutely work that is done by someone who's local and who can be trained for it. And we've had some fantastic success in going to job programs in the city, taking folks who need a job and didn't have one, training them up to be able to do this work, and now they're getting hired to do green infrastructure. And the amount of support that engenders. I like the way this report calls it benefit-cost analysis rather than cost-benefit. I sort of got a kick out of that. That these are always costs, and there's no question these are costs to municipality and to all of you. But to remember the tremendous benefit that can be gained along the way, and the benefits that can derive allies as you need support to be built for a project of this nature. So we're always doing outreach. I've gone to churches that are packed to the doors with community activists who typically are just frustrated with government agencies for whatever reason, and they were happy with us. They actually put a kayak in front of the pews that I got in the kayak with folks from the group with the idea that we were in the boat together because we were going to do green infrastructure to change the city, build communities, improve neighborhoods, make them more desirable, be connected to housing, and all the other things that we want in our cities, and solve a water quality problem and a water quantity problem that is plaguing Washington, D.C. So I hope I haven't used up too much time. The grand messages again is this is not an easy road, and I'm in some ways sorry that any municipality has to face the kinds of costs that are in a long-term control plan. I can tell you what's the bad outcome. The bad outcome is that a plan that can capture the imagination of the people who we serve is not done. It's mandated, so it has to happen. So somehow the municipality or the utility authority has got to find the funding to do the work. But if there isn't sufficient additional revenue that you've persuaded your ratepayers or taxpayers or however the funding is done, for us it's all ratepayer money, to support it, money has to come from something else. So you start taking money away from the most critical infrastructure money that any of us has, and the hardest money to find, which is the money that just fixes the water mains and improves the valves and does the pump stations and it updates the waste treatment facilities that, at least in DC, are very old. And it's the old story that the mandated projects or the permitted projects that you must do get funded while the core systems just get older and more decrepit. And it's the customer base sees those things. They see the water mains breaking out in the street, the sewer backups, the pump stations that don't work. So their mindset is, why am I paying more money or paying this money, but my service seems to be getting worse? That puts them in a downward spiral of not wanting to support just another terrible agency that must be squandering public funds. I'm not saying it's true that money's being squandered. My experience in this field is that the authorities doing this work are some of the best public servants I've ever been around. But that is a perception if the core assets of the enterprise are not maintained and rebuilt because all the money goes into a mandated project. So the need to present the case to the public in a whole new way, to think of a utility as a customer-oriented enterprise that can interact with the public, hopefully capture their imagination with job creation and community benefits, as well as water quality and air quality and all the rest, so that you engender public support and not just squeeze new work in the existing budget, but actually enhance the budget that you have, as hard as that is in any jurisdiction, is a critical to make a positive upswing, which is people seeing better service, understanding what their money is going for, and while no one pays a bill happily, my experience is that people will pay for things that they know why it matters to them, and they care about it. And if we can make that value proposition not only theoretically, but visibly to the people we serve, we have the opportunity to be on an upward spiral, which more or less I like to think we've been on at DC Water. We spend a lot of time, we want to gain support from the people that serve us so that we can do not only those projects, but so many others that I think are possible in our industry. So it's great to be back in New Jersey. It's great to be with New Jersey Future and then New Jersey DEP and the Carey and all our friends again. If there's anything that we've done in DC that can be helpful to you, we've made a lot of mistakes, but we've learned a lot along the way. We are delighted to help our compatriots here in the Garden State. Thanks so very much.